Well, folks, good evening. Welcome to this public forum to discuss the issue of the construction of these power towers across the Rappahannock. Tonight's purpose is to inform you and to bring you up to speed on where we are. There are a lot of questions that have been asked over the past several weeks about where are we, what are we doing, what's the fight all about, what's the controversy all about. Some people have asked, why are we objecting? Many others have asked, how can we help? And lots of you are aware that we're in a legal battle down at the SEC in Richmond. And that will have a very important milestone in that battle tomorrow. And Mike York is here. He's one of the litigators who will bring us up to speed at the end of a short presentation about the towers. Now, if this thing works right, and it does. This is our agenda for the evening. We're going to present the proposal. We're going to tell you why we're opposed to it. We're going to address the alternative solutions. We'll do a summary of the legal action, and then we'll very quickly turn the audience or turn the microphone and the discussion over to you, because I know a lot of you have some very good questions that you want to ask. And we do want you to get engaged, please. So the Dominion proposal is to rebuild the line that currently crosses the Rappahannock at the Norris Bridge. This is a slide prepared by Dominion that, if you could see closely, you'll see the yellow dots along the bridge that represent the 10 new towers that will be installed to carry the power lines. Now, a lot of you wonder, what is this going to look like? And that's certainly a question that Dominion grappled with. So they spared no expense in coming up with a method, a picture to show you just what those towers will look like. Now, this is what it looks like today. And here's the picture that Dominion created to show you what those towers will look like. Jason and I were down in Newport News at the VMRC hearing where this picture was presented. Actually, they presented it as well at the Tides Inn stakeholders hearing. And I can tell you from having been there, they actually did this with a straight face. I don't know how. But somewhere buried in the bottom of that picture, just above the horizon, is the image of the bridge with towers imposed on it. Now, if you want to know what those towers are really going to look like, the towers will vary in size from a low of about 120 feet. That's the tower on the left. Compared with the tower on the right, which is the existing tower, which is about 83 feet tall. Now, if you want to see those towers close up, go down to Willoughby's, get a seat in the window, stare out there and look at that tower. That tower now, in my opinion, at Willoughby's looks pretty large. This tower will be another 50% larger. And this is the shortest of the proposed Dominion towers. Now you want to see the tallest, here it is. The tallest will be, this was the proposal they took down to the VMRC, a tower 179 feet tall. These would be out near the center on either side of the channel. They are huge. And these towers, if you're a fan of towers, if you're one of those unusual people who collect artwork of power towers, this may be beautiful to you. I think this sort of arrangement, these towers, would look just fabulous on a nice industrial stretch of the New Jersey Turnpike. But they have no business whatsoever being out there on the Rappahannock, one of the most beautiful rivers, if not the most beautiful rivers in the Commonwealth. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Bellows, Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Lancaster County, to explain why we are opposed to those towers.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the reasons why we're opposed tonight to this project. Let's start with Lancaster's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is our planning document for the future of Lancaster County, where the citizens of the Lancaster County have worked together to formulate this plan with the Board of Supervisors, looking to the future of our county. Some of the key aspects of the comprehensive plan are to preserve open space and views of the river, preserve our rural character and heritage, protect the natural resources, control the character of development, preserve and promote maritime heritage, and preserve and increase public access to the water. All these form the underlying principles of opposition to the towers, which are not in keeping with this comprehensive plan. The gateway, the crossing at the Norris Bridge is the gateway to the Northern Neck, and is kind of the iconic entry to our county here. And this is where people take their inspiration when moving here. It's part of the character of the area. It's rich in history. We're not only stewards of our local history here, we're stewards of the nation's history. Part of the John Smith Trail that begins in Williamsburg goes all the way up here to where Captain John Smith came ashore at Stingray Point, and you know the history of all that in the area. So all these things are reasons why they form the foundation of why we're opposed to the project as presented by Dominion. We've done considerable investments in our tourist economy and our economy here that promote the area and promote the beauty of the area. The governor was just here last week talking about and launching the Oyster Trail. These are one of the major economic initiatives we've worked in this county to promote, and we've branded the area in the state for the oyster. We've also worked with Delmartic in that branding through an initiative. Lots of your tax dollars have been invested in the future of our economy here in Lancaster County. Town revitalization. You know here in Delmartic they did lots of work with beautifying the town. The town of Whitestone and other towns in the area are currently working with the Northern Neck District Planning to revitalize the town and try to bring in new business and re-beautify the towns to make it more inviting and more welcoming to new visitors and new residents that would like to find their home here in Lancaster County. Boat tax initiative. Many of you know that we pushed forward a reduction in the boat tax last year. This was aimed at reviving the maritime economics around here. A lot of the marinas and things were suffering. We've lost a lot of business since the recession, so lowering the boat tax was one of the economic initiatives that we worked forward to hope revitalize our marinas. And as of today, over 60 businesses have signed a declaration opposing the towers because they know the impact that such a monstrous towers will have on the aesthetic beauty of the river and what detriment that will be to incoming visitors and potential future residents, which they depend on for their businesses. Whether it's restaurants or home builders, all these types of businesses are needing of new residents and visitors here to keep them viable. As you see here in the picture here, if you read a couple weeks ago, it was talking about tourist revenues and how Lancaster and Middlesex County were leading the state in this pack. So what it says is that these economic initiatives that we've worked hard on to promote are working and are being successful. We don't want to do anything that would go against these things and start to reverse the clock on these successes that we've had. We want to keep moving forward and keep growing this economy. These are the impacts tourist dollars have here in Lancaster County. Over $84 million were spent by tourists, leading to 750 jobs and $2.2 million in tax receipts. In Northumberland County, about 58,600,000 jobs, 1.6 million in tax receipts. Middlesex County, 90 million, a little over 1,100 jobs, and 2.5 million for a regional total of $232 million and tax revenues are money spent here by tourists, and 2,470 jobs created and $6.3 million in tax receipts. This is a big impact for our area, a lot to put at risk when we have other alternatives that can be in place other than these towers. A big part of this whole process is the lack of transparency. This is one of the several different public events that Save the Rappahannock has put together, but to date Dominion has held when it was meaningful in the planning process. There were no economic, environmental, or aesthetic impacts really done, or they were high level with the nationwide permit that was done with the Army Corps. None of the alternatives that we're going to talk about tonight were seriously considered or vetted or looked into as possible solutions for this crossing. Attempt to avoid the SCC review. And in numerous states, in the state, let me start here. In the state of Virginia, transmission lines that are above 138 kilovolt fall within the State Corporation Commission's purview. So anything greater than that, they automatically have a say in and has to be reviewed. Anything below that, it falls into whether it's ordinary extension in the course of business or whether it is falling above that kilovolt threshold. In their case, these towers are basically being built for the structure and capability of 230. There's already 230 kilovolt lines on the Middlesex side. There's some on the Lancaster side as well. It's just this one portion in the middle that they're only going to charge to 115 kilovolt. But so, and also putting towers that are, or putting connections that are currently connected to the bridge and replacing them on new huge towers in the water, which would then require fenders on the channel towers, is something that's beyond the ordinary course of business and belongs to be reviewed by the SCC to verify all the possible alternatives and the best choice. Some of you may have seen the full page ads that Dominion ran. If you look here to on this part of the screen right here, this is the advertisement that Dominion ran to notify you of this project that was going to be moving forward. Nobody saw this except one person who read this in Middlesex County, Emily Davis. And she wrote a letter to the VMRC contesting this project. And that's when it kind of got on the radar. And without that one person notifying this letter, none of us would be here tonight and none of us would have had any public input. This whole project would have been approved administratively and you would have been left out of this process entirely. So we owe a great deal of gratitude and thanks to Ms. Davis for recognizing that letter, or recognizing this notice, writing that letter of importance, and allowing us to be here today to fight on behalf of the residents of Lancaster County. After that fact, you can see here that they ran 5 weeks of full color page ads. You all got this letter, pages of letters that they sent to every single customer. Where were those notifications when something could have been done meaningful in the planning process to have your voice heard? It was absent. This is what we are fighting for. This is the protection of a resource that belongs to not only the people here in Lancaster County, it belongs to all Virginians. We have a duty and an important role to play in preserving this, not only for ourselves, but for future generations. We would not want to do anything to spoil this view with towers when we have the capability of other alternatives that would preserve this view and protect this resource for future generations. Thank you. We'll now have Ian Ormisher, who will come up and talk about some of the alternatives, some of the alternative solutions to the project.
Thanks, Jason. Can everybody hear me okay? Good stuff. Just to pick up a couple of points of context from what Jason was saying before I start to look at the alternatives. The first and primary one is that we all think power here in the Northern Neck is really important. So nobody wants to put us in a situation where we are likely to lose the power that we all depend on. The second is that before we can have a meaningful conversation about alternatives, we must have an opportunity to talk about them. And as Jason's explained, that opportunity just has not existed so far. It was quite a surprise to me to learn that Dominion, in doing this, hadn't spoken to VDOT about removing power lines from the bridge. The only conversations that Dominion had had with VDOT were about the nature of the bottom that they discovered when they were doing the geotechnical surveys to put in the original bridge structure. They'd had no discussions with VDOT about loading on the bridges. They'd had no discussion about placing other lines on the bridges. They'd had no discussion about potential failure of any elements of the line supports on the bridges. So the purpose here of this session is really to try and inform us all and bring us up to some common level of knowledge about what the potential solutions might be, so that when we get the opportunity to have this conversation with Dominion and with the SCC after the legal challenge, then we're all informed and can express our views with some information behind it. What I'm going to look at are what we would see as, we're not proposing any of these as the way forward, what we would see as 4 potential alternate solutions to what Dominion are proposing. And I think I'm obstructing people's views there, so I will move. The first is the most obvious. Why are we removing these lines from the bridge? And to me at the moment it is unclear. I know there are some complexities with operating these. I know there are some difficulties with working on those lines. Those lines have been on the bridge since 1962. There have been minimal outages on them that have affected customers. In the last 5 years, as far as we're aware, and this is Dominion's figures, there's been 1 outage that affected customers. And that was a major one, but it actually took them 9.5 hours to resolve it, whereas in Northern Virginia on a similar outage, it took them 1.5 hours. So there are serious questions to be asked. Dominion, as recently as November 2014, fall of 2014, were undergoing planned maintenance routines and replacing insulators, major insulators on the crossing. So why suddenly, almost out of the blue, has this tower proposal come forward? We don't know. We'd like to have the opportunity to discuss that. We'd like to know why it's proposed that these lines are removed from the bridge. At the moment, it is unclear. What are the advantages if we could leave these on the bridge? Well, the advantage is quite significant. Cost-wise, it is the least expensive solution. It's a cost that probably numbers in small hundreds of thousands of dollars as opposed to millions of dollars, which the other solutions would involve. From a perspective of maintaining the economic value of the bridge to the area and what that does to bring visitors, it would mean no change to the view shed, so we wouldn't be losing there. On the downside, the bridge is aging. We know that. These connections are aging. It requires routine maintenance to work on it and keep it up to speed. When there is work going on the lines, they need to clear and coordinate with VDOT, and they need to close part of the bridge, which we know is inconvenient. And likewise, when VDOT are working on the bridge, they need to shut off the power, which gives us a radial line feeding into Northumberland, gives us a radial line coming across the Rappahannock and Tappahannock. So there are potential weaknesses, but this is one of the alternative solutions that we have. One of the solutions which you may have heard of involves putting the lines on the bottom of the river. This is something called jet trenching. You'll have seen it at work locally on dry land in a similar form. I think you're all familiar with the ditch witch. Well, this is the underwater version of the ditch witch. Jet trenching is where a cable would be laid. Oops, sorry. I'm supposed to press a pointer. Jet trenching is where a cable would be laid from a barge or a boat down onto the bottom, and then a trenching sled, either using a mechanical device or water jets, comes along and digs a trench. The cable falls into the trench on the bottom, and the spoil that is blown up by the mechanical device or by the jets are then deposited back onto the cable as it goes through. So basically the jet trenching digs a hole and then reburies the cable as it goes through. It's got some advantage to it. It's a relatively simple process, and with that, there are significant costs, but they're not huge. I would categorize those as medium costs. The cable will be buried under the river and under the bed, So it doesn't suffer storm damage in the same way, it doesn't suffer the frequent lightning strikes that cause outages, doesn't suffer the frequent bird strikes and debris strikes. So in many views, there are less frequent outages through this underwater route than there are through that going across on towers and overhead. One big advantage is there are no adverse aesthetic impacts. It's buried under the water, you wouldn't see it. And also one significant one is that it would reduce the loading on the bridge and therefore potentially increase the longevity of the bridge. On the downside, and it's one that people think quite a lot about, there would be some temporary disruption to the bottom. There'd be spoil thrown up and deposited in different places while it cuts through, but that is a temporary impact. Some estimates on how long it takes for jet trenching to recover the bottom suggests for shallow water where there's tidal movement and wind wash and wave wash, it takes something like about 30 days. Where it's deeper water, it takes longer. So, for instance, on the bottom of the channel, it would take longer because there isn't the wave action and the wind action. One downside, although the chance of outages are considerably less, if there is an outage, it may take longer to repair, depending on what the nature of the outage is. If it's a physical break in the cable, it would certainly take longer to repair than if it were run on an overhead cable. So that's jet trenching. I mean, you may not have heard of jet trenching, but it's actually used quite significantly. It's used in a small scale quite a lot. Most of you will have crossed the Pianka tank at the crossing there. If you look to the right-hand side as you're going across, you won't see wires. They go up to the water, then they disappear, then they reappear at the other side. Those are direct trenched under the water. If you're going over to Matthews, on the crossing onto Gwyn's Island, again, you won't see cables there. They were jet trenched under the water by Dominion. It's used on the Hudson River. There's something like 3 miles of direct trenching going in on the Edgewater side and coming up between piers 92 and 94. There's a proposal in to bring power across from Canada into Erie, Pennsylvania. Some, I think it's about 30 miles of direct trenching on the bottom of Lake Erie. And another one that's of interest, the Long Island Sound. Long Island Sound has power walk from the Connecticut side across to Long Island, some 25 miles of trenching underneath the Sound. So, you know, it is a method that's used quite considerably, and, you know, clearly if there were discussions and concerns about what it does to the bottom, then it would suggest that those have been looked at for it to get those kind of approvals. One of the methods that's got quite a lot of buzz recently and been talked about quite a lot is horizontal direct drilling, or directional boring, as you may know it. I know this slide is difficult to see, but directional boring is a little bit more space age. Basically, a drill rig is set up on one side of the river, with a shallow drill bit pointing down at about 11 degrees. And when I say a drill bit, what I mean is it's basically a jet on the end of a hose that fires high pressure water into the ground, then pumps it away. So it jet drills a hole through. And on horizontal drilling, it would potentially drill underneath the riverbed and out through to the other side. Once it gets to the other side, it's left a hole, and you know, the hole size varies. They consider it to be small, but it could be 8 or 12 inches in diameter. But once on the other side, they will attach something called a reamer. And they will attach a drill pipe to it. And the reamer acts like a conventional drill. It's pulled back following the wash pipe that was used for the high pressure drill, and is pulled back to open up the size of the hole. And then once that's done, the reamer's brought back round to the far side again, and it's pulled through the hole again, but this time with cable or conduit attached to it, so it can bring the cable underneath the river. So that's horizontal direct drilling. Advantages and disadvantages. On the advantages side, it's very low environmental impact because it goes under the riverbed. Clearly, from our perspective, no adverse impact on the aesthetics because it's underground. Like the similar instance, it's impervious to storm damage because it's under the river, and it reduces the bridge loading. Now, this one is significantly more expensive and requires land on either side of the river to make the crossing, but it is the environmentally least intrusive of them. Now, when HDD is used, it's not usually used in isolation. It's usually used, for most instances, in combination with jet trenching. This is so environmentally friendly that HDD is usually used to drill under the wetlands on either side of the river, and then jet trenching is used across the river itself. So where I gave the instances of the two before, both Matthews and the Pianka tank, they actually did HDD for a short section underneath the marshy bit on either side, and then they jet trenched across the middle. And that's the method that's used generally when it's deployed. There are quite a few instances of HDD being used locally. For some reason, it's not one that Dominion gets to use very often, but anyone who operates in the cable industry will see that most of the crossings under the rivers are via HDD. In 1999, Level 3 Communications did do two major crossings that covered Miles Creek in Mecklenburg County, Shining Creek, Great Creek, Wall Creek, the Heron Creek in Brunswick County. It did another lot that covered, that went underneath the Potomac's River, the Potomac's Canal, and underneath the James. And that was in 1999. Amazingly, the month after Dominion put in their proposal for these towers to the BMRC, Metro Fibre, another fibre optic company, put in a proposal for 2 fibre optic cables to go underneath Hampton Roads. So 2 fibre optic cables to go underneath, 2 fibre optic cables to go underneath 13,400 feet of river. So it's quite clearly that some organisations are forced to use HDD, but Dominion seems to be able to proceed in the way it wants. It's not just used on a small scale. Up in Woodbridge Energy Centre in New Jersey, there's a 3-mile crossing that includes the Ruritan River. In Wilmington, Cape Fear, there's a crossing under the Cape Fear River, 6,000 feet, 6,800 feet of crossing, 100 feet below the river. When David Collins of Progress Energy Carolinas was asked why they actually put that through with HDD rather than a second overhead crossing, what he said was that reliability. The utility didn't want the risk of running another overhead line. They'd rather have the HDD line, which gave them 2 separate lines, one of which wasn't like to get storm damage. HDD is used for massive pipes to go under rivers. In Orange Beach, Alabama, Florida Avenue substation, a huge 36-inch conduit under 6,300 feet wide crossing. Lake Charles, Louisiana, a massive 42-inch pipeline underneath the Intercoastal Waterway. Pensacola, Florida, 5,300 feet of a 30-inch steel casing for a water main. So HDD, although we haven't heard much about it, is used commonly throughout the country for major crossings. It's very interesting at the VMRC hearing, and it's interesting to read the transcript. One of the first things that Jay Woodward, one of the VMRC staff, said at that hearing was that in a perfect world, we'd tell Dominion to bury it in Middlesex and go under the river and pop up in Lancaster. Why the VMRC did not pursue the recommendations of its staff that they indicated then, and why the staff did not put that more forcibly, is beyond me. Okay, the final part of my little bit on alternatives, sort of the holy grail. One of the alternatives that would be really attractive would be the prospect of a new bridge. Unfortunately, as we all know, a new bridge is expensive and requires a lot of political will. And to achieve that requires quite a lot of momentum. But if we were able to get a new bridge, it would be a win-win for all concerned. It would be really good for the economy of the area. One, it would bring a lot of contractors in to actually build the bridge itself. Two, it would improve the communication routes across the river. We all know how many people say, I don't like driving across that bridge. Hopefully with a new architecturally pleasing bridge, that would change that. And hopefully it would be something good to look at. The example there is the I-295 crossing over the James. The disadvantage, a bridge, once it's in the planning stage, takes 8 to 10 years for completion. At the moment, we don't have a bridge in the planning station, and we don't have the funds. It is not budgeted. So there would need to be quite a lot of movement for us to get the opportunity for a new bridge. So, we've got some alternate solutions. I think the thing is that we really need to work on to find and force Dominion to actually have a discussion about it and see if we can't get them to move to one of these alternate solutions. And certainly from my perspective, I would not like to lose the view shed that we have, not only of the bridge, but more importantly, for the 9,500 vehicle crossings, probably something like 13,000, 14,000 people every day that cross that bridge. I don't think we want the bridge, the views of Middlesex and Lancaster destroyed by the towers that Dominion are proposing. Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. A couple of people here I want to recognize, but I really appreciate Carl's leadership, Jason's leadership, and Ian's, as you can tell, incredibly intense yeoman-like work. I don't know if you noticed or if you picked up on this, but Ian's an engineer. My name is Michael York. I live in Whitestone, and I practice law also in Northern Virginia. And I want to just pick up on the last thing Ian said about forcing Dominion to sit down and talk. Not to talk at us or to tell us, but to sit down and talk with us and see if we can reason together. I can assure you that that's been a suggestion that we made to Dominion. So far, we've been rebuffed. So we're trying to force that and also give us all the folks here in this area a seat at that table. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't know if Emily is here, but she is really the hero so far in this fight for noticing that little bitty 1-inch ad in the local paper. That started the ball rolling and gave a really important impetus to form a core group that was led really by the people you see up here that went to the VMRC, that's the Virginia Marine Resources Commission, which is the only state agency that Dominion approached for something sort of on the lines of a building permit. And if you know anything about VMRC, you'll know that they only have jurisdiction to regulate activities under the water level for a transmission line. I mean, go figure. Dominion did this really almost in the dark of night. That hearing was held in July, and we all know that it went Dominion's way. There are probably a lot of reasons for that, but the county did the logical next step. They challenged the VMRC in court, sued the VMRC, and appealed the decision. Well, I can tell you, you probably all have heard that you can't fight City Hall. Well, that's not really true. I have sued the largest local government in the state of Virginia and won even without a fight in court. Dominion is a whole different animal. Dominion is a monopoly and a, frankly, lightly regulated monopoly with enormous political clout and enormous legal firepower. This is the fight of anyone's life to go up against Dominion. Well, we next attempted to head Dominion off at the pass. We figured that they probably had so much power here in the state of Virginia, maybe we'd stand a fair fight with the Army Corps of Engineers, which also regulates various ingress and egress and activities in navigable waters. This, of course, is a navigable waterway, and we knew that they were attempting to get a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. We tried that pathway, and obviously we weren't successful. Then we spent a lot of time analyzing the various legal routes that are available to us, and settled on the State Corporation Commission. I'm pretty sure William Barnhart is here. William, are you here? Yes. William Barnhart is one of the most courageous people I know. Not only does he run a restaurant, but he is the petitioner in the case that has his name. In the application of William Barnhart is the case that is pending before the State Corporation Commission, and in fact, it goes to trial tomorrow. I'm one of the lawyers in that case, and so I'll be leaving before you get a chance to ask me any questions. Carl can do that for me, but I can tell you that there are no slam dunks, and most lawyers would be foolish to even predict a particular court would rule that the sun will come up tomorrow. But I feel pretty good about this case. I feel much better about our case than I would about Dominion's case. Dominion has, as Jason said, appeared to some people to do everything they could to stay away from the State Corporation Commission. It's called a commission, but in this particular instance, it acts as a 3-judge court to rule on the facts and the law, and we will be presenting evidence in the form of testimony and legal arguments tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. at the commission's courtroom in Richmond. I can tell you that we've already been there once on October 19th. We were very concerned that barges were approaching the bridge. We got information that they were approaching the bridge, so we filed an emergency petition with the State Corporation Commission for a preliminary injunction, which frankly courts don't like to give. We were successful to persuade the State Corporation Commission that we had a reasonable likelihood of success when we came to trial, and that if they didn't act, Dominion would cause permanent damage to the river. That's pretty much the legal standard. And if there's anything more permanent than a 200-foot transmission tower anchored with steel and concrete pilings, I don't know what it is. Luckily, we won that preliminary injunction that stopped Dominion in its tracks, and we hope to do that again tomorrow. I'm going to conclude just by saying that tomorrow is not the end of the game by any means. It would only be the beginning of the next phase. What we've asked the State Corporation Commission to do is to take jurisdiction of this case and to force Dominion to do exactly what Ian said. Set out the alternatives, make their case for the transmission towers, and more importantly, to allow the public to have input and to give us a seat at the table to actually be a player in the proceeding where we would be able to participate with our own experts, our own testimony, our own cross-examination of Dominion on the very facts that they're relying on. It's not going to be an easy task if we are successful tomorrow. It's not going to be inexpensive, but it's something we have to do. We have to win this case. So wish us well, and please support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ian. Mike, get some sleep. You're going to need it. Short tomorrow. Now we're going to go to questions and answers, and the floor is pretty much open to anybody that would like to answer a question. Before I start calling on questioners, I want to make this comment. Mike was unwilling to make a prediction about the outcome for tomorrow. I am. We're going to win. We're going to win big. We got a great legal team, including Mike. We got a great argument, great case. The facts are on our side, and I think that The SCC staff is clearly in our camp. They wrote a brief for the case that is 100% supportive of our case. So we're going in with an incredibly strong hand tomorrow morning. I predict we're going to win. When we win, we're going to move into the next phase, which will give us time to come up with a winning strategy to try to convince Dominion to accept one of these other solutions, try to convince the SCC to compel Dominion to choose one of these alternatives. The bottom line is, we can win. We can win. But in order to do that, we're going to have to stick together, we're going to have to fight together. We're going to have to work hard, we're going to have to sacrifice. It's going to be costly, as Mike said. So I need to squeeze some of you folks, and more anybody that's capable of putting money in the hat. We're talking to the Board of Supervisors to try to persuade them to contribute to the effort as well. We hope that the Board of Supervisors in Middlesex will be willing to contribute. We're also talking to the Economic Development Authority here in Lancaster to encourage them to contribute. Our legal bills at this point are approaching $50,000. By the time the sun sets tomorrow, after the hearing, I think we're going to be up around $55,000. Now at that point, the clock stops as far as our legal expenses are concerned for this phase. And we have the opportunity to decide what we want to do next. Do we want to go out and hire experts and lawyers and do all that with a massive campaign? Or do we want to keep it more modest? My guess is we're going to choose to keep it more modest. We're going to count on the SCC staff for their expertise to carry the case through. So that means the big chunk of money that needs to be, that was required to get us this far, will be just that $55,000. Now that's it on costs, so let me open the floor to questions. Hilda's got a microphone. Yes, ma'am.
Why would the design of the towers have to be so massive?
Yeah.
Why would the design of the towers have to be so massive?
Ian, you want to do that?
Yeah. One of the major factors, I don't think you're going to speak right into it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
One of the major factors is the clearance required by the Army Corps of Engineers and by the Coast Guard for shipping going underneath. The bridge is a clearance of 110 feet, and so the towers need to be high enough that if there's droop in the line, it still stays over that 110 feet, plus a gap, which is basically a spark gap, so it can't leak down and connect to anything that's at 110 feet high.
But aren't the wires parallel to the bridge now?
Indeed they are, which is at the same, effectively the same height or just slightly lower, I believe.
So the towers need to be so much higher?
Okay, it's that droop thing. The towers have got to get there. It's like a washing line hanging. They've got the lowest point. The lowest point needs to be, I think it's
20 feet.
20 feet. So it needs to be 130 feet above. So hence they need these towers so high.
Questions?
Your go.
Julian? Yes, sir.
How much financial resources have been contributed to date by counties of Lancaster, Middlesex, or others for this effort?
0.
And secondly, how much annually does Dominion pay the citizens in the Commonwealth to use our bridge currently?
That's a good question, but I don't have an answer that they pay a royalty to VDOT or the county of that I know of.
They're getting a free ride on our bridge right now.
That's a great question.
It's a great question.
I do want to make something perfectly clear that with Jason sitting up here in answer to your question, Julian, how much has the County of Lancaster contributed? The answer is nothing so far. Jason has been working very hard behind the scenes to try to encourage the right outcome. You may be sure. And I have a good feeling that I think we'll get there. It's going to take some time, effort, and frankly, all of you could contribute to that by calling up your supervisors or individual supervisors to encourage them to support this effort. please. Questions? Gentlemen in
This is a question for Ian. I think you may have covered this, but in the event that the current bridge was used to carry the line, does that mean that automatically that whenever maintenance was being done on the bridge, we'd have power outages?
No, it doesn't. Line 65 is effectively a long line or loop, which power to us most of the time effectively comes across the Rappahannock at the Rappahannock and then loops at Rappahannock and then loops round. Now, when the bridge is being worked on, it becomes what they call a radial line. So instead of it being a loop, it's just the one piece that comes around here and ends in Whitestone. Now, it's extremely rare for there to be outages on transmission lines. It's something like 1% of all outages are an outage on a transmission line. So the chances of it happening are slim. And as far as I'm aware, there's only been one customer outage in the last 5 years on that transmission line. Now, if by any chance that line were out of action because VDOT were working on it or because Dominion were working on it, one assumes that knowing that it is a radial line, VDOT would have Dominion would have procedures in place that in the event of an outage on the other part of the line, they could bring it back up quickly. What those procedures are, I don't know, but certainly you would have thought that there was no reason why you should not have more than a couple of hours outage at maximum. So no, you can't expect us to be having outages. It's an unlikely event, and that can be mitigated against as well.
I'll follow up on that just a little bit. When the bridge was worked on just recently with the most recent painting that took place, there was an outage on that line for 1,034 days. So that line was turned off for that pretty much the whole time. If you remember, during that time there was a fire at a substation up in Warsaw that took out the other line. That was the only incident that Ian talked about in the last 5 years of an outage on line 65. It had nothing to do with the bridge crossing line, but that shows you that just turning off the line for that many days, we were not without power for 1,000 days. This is a backup line that increases reliability to the area, but the fact that transmission lines represent only 1% of all outages, the likelihood of any prolonged outage for any extended amount of time, if something with this line were to be taken offline, is highly unlikely. So the reliability of power here in the Northern Neck is fairly strong. As you're aware, most outages occur on distribution lines due to ice storms, hurricanes, things like that that damage the poles or the lines. Transmission lines are usually very high up, so they're out usually of the way of tree damage. They can get affected by storms, and the lines on the bridge can get affected by birds sometimes, or lightning strikes, but generally transmission outages are very rare, and this line has had a number of scheduled outages because of bridge maintenance and things, and they already have that working relationship in place. It's been in place for 60 years, and so Dominion and VDOT have a very strong working relationship and know how to work through any potential problems that would arise if they had to work together.
question. Gentlemen.
All right, first of all, I want to thank you for being here, because information that's brought out to everybody is so important. I've learned so much just listening to you, and thank you very much. But the question is, if I'm hearing it right, was Dominion invited to this meeting tonight?
I'll answer that. Dominion was not extended a special invitation, but because this was open to the public, certainly Dominion is welcome. I don't know, there may be some Dominion representatives.
That was my next question, was is there anybody from Dominion here?
Well, I don't know, and I wouldn't, well, we welcome you, but I wouldn't want you to think that we intentionally did not invite Dominion. They're welcome as part of the public. But I'd like to also point out that Dominion has been invited to several events. Jason held a stakeholders event at the Tides Inn early on in this process, at several board of supervisors hearing meetings. Dominion has been invited to make presentations. We invited Dominion executives down to join us for a discussion at lunch at the Tides. The Lancaster Republicans have invited the Dominion representatives to come and make a presentation. The Lancaster Democrats similarly invited Dominion to come and make a presentation. But how many times do you think Dominion has held a public event to invite all of you? 0. It's been a very one-way street. And you saw Jason posted that up here. You saw the little notice that was posted in the paper. That was it. When they were looking to get this through and meet the minimum requirements of the law, that was it. No public hearings, no public meetings. That was all. And but for good old Emily Davies over in Middlesex spotting that little column in the paper and calling up the VMRC and objecting, but for that, there would not have been a single public hearing on this project.
Isn't Dominion a servant for the community?
Next question. Yes, sir.
My name is Ethan Branston. Like the rest of you who are not natives, I'm a come here. We didn't get here until 1642. So I feel there's some kind of responsibility for the future since we haven't messed it up entirely yet. My ancestors also had the kahunas to sign the Leedstown Resolve. Puny people against the crown. And this is a similar battle, the birthplace of freedom and people having the guts to stand up to this sort of thing. Started here in the backwater of the Northern Neck. And my cousin George Washington, Robert E. Lee, all those people took a chance. And I think that we can do something. I wonder if anyone knows the precedent of leverage. I lived with and traveled with the wife of the former CEO of Dominion for some time. She said if we knew the truth about their involvement with Enron, they'd all be wearing flip-flops and orange jumpsuits. So one of my former clients that I turned down because of, he's the CFO of Dominion, happens to have a home in Irvington. Bill Westbrook's former home, if you want to pick it. You know where that is. It'd be a great place to put the tunnel right up to his front lawn. So they all listen to some kind of leverage, whether it's 60 Minutes or some kind of, we may be the mouse that roared, but I know if we find out where, I was up doing grassroots spokesmanship trying to help Virginia Food Freedom when Haley and her mom from Whitestone, embarrassed the hell out of the legislature by pushing their little wheelchair from floor to floor at those meetings. Nothing would have happened if she hadn't embarrassed them like that and shamed them. But she did it, and now Haley has an option that she didn't. We have civic groups, we have school groups, we have bake sales, we have churches. Everybody can cough up some money and pick it and do something. And I think we need to know where their Achilles heel is. Well, Goliath, we're little David. We can do something, but we all have to do it together. You see, all our service groups, all our churches, all those organizations. And if our elected officials in our counties don't back up, then they need to be told that we can get someone else to be our public servants. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
My check right here. Anyone else have one?
Oh,
yeah.
thank you.
Who am I to?
Save the Rappahannock Coalition.
Okay, anyone else have anything?
Questions? Yes, sir. Behind you.
My name is George Cooper, and I'm a much more recent come here, 2 years. First off, I'd like to thank you for the accomplishments that you and those associated with you have brought about. The fact that you have gotten this far is remarkable. I think it would be helpful if you could tell us a little bit about the organization that's going to lead us into the future, and how, in addition to sending you checks, hopefully large ones, we can support that organization.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. The organization is Save the Rappahannock Coalition. I'll tell you how it got started. A little over a year ago, we were faced with a different kind of a battle. The county board of supervisors wanted to build a ramp on Simmons Cove off Diamond Creek. There were a number of people in the area who thought that was a terrible place to build it because it really didn't benefit the boaters. It was way up at the end of the creek that was often a mud flat when the tide was out. So it would have required 200 yards of dredging, and dredging would have been recurring. It was a dreadful place, but it looked like a good idea at the time from the county's point of view because the land had been given to the county for nothing in exchange for building a boat ramp. So we got involved, and our group called the Diamond Creek Environmental Preservation Association ended up fighting against that and ultimately persuading the county board of supervisors to vote down. Jason was one of our leaders in that effort to ensure that the right outcome was achieved, and in the end, we prevailed. And as a result, by the way, the county has now returned its focus to Windmill Point to get a ramp. They have done a marvelous job negotiating with the owner out there. There is going to be a public ramp out at Windmill Point, and that is where everybody wanted it in the first place. So it's a very positive outcome to that situation. So we basically took the organization of Diamond Creek Environmental Preservation Association, slapped a new name on it. Jason called up and said, hey, would you help out? So the answer was, of course we will. We slapped a new name on it and took off running with the help of people like Joy Gwaltney, who's marvelous with this sort of artwork, and others in the group. We were up and running instantly. We were the Minutemen who were able to respond in time to ultimately stop Dominion when the barges were right there on the river. They were sinking the templates, ready to go. I mean, the timing, the race to the finish line could not have been tighter.
My question relates to the future. How are we going to organize so that it's not legal fees that draws us into the next battle, but potentially...
Could you, sir, use them? I'm sorry.
Forgive me. I'm interested in the future. How are we going to strategize, and who does the strategizing, so that the next battles are determined by where we might win, and they might be determined by something other than where the greatest legal fees may be generated?
Well, we have a group we call the Leadership Group. Many of them are here tonight. We've been getting together on a weekly basis to talk strategy. Our strategy so far has been stop Dominion with an injunction, buy enough time to go into phase 3, and in phase 3 come up with a winning strategy. There are many winning strategies, as you saw here, many winning alternatives that would be acceptable to all of us. Basically, I think all of us would say anything but towers would be acceptable. So once that injunction is extended, and I expect it will be tomorrow, that's going to open up the window for that strategizing to take place. And right now, most of that strategizing is going to take place among that leadership group. And if any of you would like to get involved in that, just let me know. We welcome your participation.
I'll follow up a little bit. I think the Save the Rappahannock group has the potential to be a future group that preserves and protects the region and protects the lower Rappahannock, but as well, get involved in local government. Local government is where things happen here. This is where you can make a difference. Sometimes it's very hard to think you have a voice or have any difference in Washington and places, but you do have a voice here in local government. And this is where the rubber meets the road. So get involved, stay involved, come to board of supervisors meetings, call your board of supervisors meeting. If you do that and get involved in local government, you'll hear about things that are going on. We'll have a better network of people that can work together, and we can move this county forward. I've been here, I'm a 5th generation resident. I want to see this county better than it is today, and I want to leave it better for my grandkids and for future generations.
I'm Norm Mosier.
Can I just comment on this as well, if I could? A group like ours is a very loosely knit coalition. We're a group of people that have got together because we're interested in preserving what we view as a unique and valuable asset. Not only unique in this county, but unique in the state and unique here in the US. And it's a group of people with a diverse set of skills, but we are extremely stretched, and it consumes a lot of our time and a lot of our individual money. So if anyone else feels that they have got time and effort and skills they can bring to this challenge, we would love them to join us. So if you have those things, please do. Please contact Carl, please contact any of us. We would welcome you with open arms.
Please, questions?
I'm Norm Mosier. You mentioned the poll with local government, and it's my understanding that our elected representatives have decided to sit this one out and take a bye on it. Your strategy should have, and I hope it would have, is a political aspect to it. The governor should be aware of the fight that's going on. As you plan for the future, Dominion has enormous political power. And slip an amendment in that you'd never see, and suddenly it's law. So I would strongly urge you to think very hard about the lobbying aspect of this effort. And thank you for your effort to date. It's been terrific.
Thank you, Norm. I've been kind of the lead point on the political aspect, and we originally had reached out to other boards and local governments in the area for this purpose, and we've gotten some support from them. We have reached out continuously to our state representatives. You can see they're not here again tonight. You can read into that as you wish. I have written the governor personally. I know a number of other people. I know the organization has written the governor as well. The governor, like I said, was just here. He is aware of the controversy, and so they are aware of it. So it is on the radar at the governor's mansion.
Sir. Hilda, up front. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm neither an engineer nor a lawyer, but I am a resident. And I guess my simple mind is thinking that there's more to this than perhaps we know, and I could be wrong in that as well. But Jason, you brought it up earlier, that capacity needs of the Northern Neck are roughly, what, 130 to 140 kilovolts?
The current line is 115 kilovolt.
Okay, 115, and we're looking at towers to be constructed to do 230, right?
Well, the line is going to be maintained at 115 according to Dominion, but the tower is going to be constructed to carry in the future capacity.
So it has a capacity to be expanded to that. But the point being that we know the line is a backup line already. We've got to have handling power. It's not a reliability issue. But through my limited intel about this story, is all this power and capabilities being put there so that they can serve the needs of Eastern Virginia as over a 5-year growth plan that Dominion Power has in hand. And I just wonder if anybody's raised that question about why do you need to build this kind of capacity to begin with? And if you are building it for the eastern part of the state, that's fine. Put it under the water. And we'll all pay for it in the state, just like everybody else has in the previous thing. So I'm just curious as to whether you've heard anything like that.
That is a good point, and that question has been sort of raised, but no, there has not been any definitive answer. They continue to stand behind that this line serves the 19,000 customers here in the Northern Neck. But point very well taken, and we have looked into pursue those answers.
Thank you. Question? Yes, sir. Hilda? Hilda? Roy?
I live about a half a mile below the river, downriver. And in the summertime, I see a lot of boat traffic. Right now, I see a lot of oyster boats out there. I'm right in front of where the barge hookup is, and I know the barge has trouble sometimes getting through the bridge with the currents and winds pushing. I mean, the tugboats have trouble pushing upriver. What kind of impact will those fenders have? I understand they're going to be 200 feet long. What kind of impact will these towers and fenders have on the boating?
Great question. Is Bruce Sanders here tonight? Bruce Sanders, most of you know, I heard him speak on this. He is better qualified than I am to answer it. Bruce, would you please?
Thanks. I'm Bruce Sanders. I live in Irvington. I'm in the marine business. And none of the photographs really depict the size of the fenders. They're some 200 feet long. The bridge and the towers go north-south. The fenders will go east-west. And they'll be on either side of the center span. As it is now, just about all the boats and sailboats, you can see this picture here, they like to traverse under the center span. Obviously, a sailboat would want to run the risk of going down one of the lower spans. And if the wind is blowing east-west, then you have to close haul or attack through the center span. Most good sailors can do that at this point. But if you add another 200 feet of fender material, and the fenders are, as I understand, 9-foot tall pilings driven right next to each other. So they're really a wall, is what they are, on both sides of the passageway. So it really sets up a navigation channel through the center of the bridge. And I maintain that that is a hazard to navigation. I know a lot of people going upriver. There are lots of people that have waterfront property in Middlesex and Lancaster County that have nice boats in front of their houses. There are marinas, lots of marinas in Middlesex County, up in Urbana, over in Rappahannock River, and even in Carter's Creek, where my place is. And I believe this being a hazard to navigation could have a significant economic negative impact to the economy of Middlesex and Lancaster County. And I don't believe that's been addressed at all by anybody. And I think it needs to be studied. I can imagine someone trying to come up river in a nice sailboat and being confronted with this issue and saying, I don't think I want to try that. I'm going to have to take down my sails. That's a lot of work. You have to take down your sails, secure everything on deck, and then motor through the bridge. It does not make any economic sense to me. And I think it really needs to be studied, because I think if people would open up their eyes and take a look, it could be a real problem. Maybe people, if they had to go to that trouble, wouldn't bother to even go on the western side of the bridge. And there's a lot up here that we need to protect and keep strong. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce.
Point well taken too, because Dominion has not presented in any of their so-called pictures that they did do, does not depict the fenders at all in any of those things. The only thing about the fenders is an engineering schematic of the size and the height, and it requires 46 additional pilings that will be hammered into the ground, concrete pilings that will make up those fenders, and the batting boards will extend 9 feet off the water line.
I want to thank you all. My name is Ron Herring. I'm actually from Northumberland County, but I've been following you guys and appreciate the fight that's going on. I'm going to go back to it's an opinion with a question in the middle of it. Looking at the towers, no, okay. I have questions about the jet trenching, and I'm way in favor of the boring, of the underground boring. And the reason I draw that conclusion, having been behind the back end of a trencher many times and realizing what's left on top of the surface and trying to get it back in, and it's depicted, that's going to be really cool because it'll just naturally fall back in. But when that jet goes across there and it does that trenching, we're not talking about a 16-inch trench with a little trencher. And the spoils from that, just looks like to me it would be devastating to the oyster bed. I don't know that. It's just an opinion. I'm just going by common experience from walking behind a trencher on the land. So my question is, what are we thinking here? I know we're all in favor of boring. I say, but to go up there with an alternative that didn't take a lesser cost and doing as much damage to the oyster bed or the oyster grounds across there that VMRC so happily just gave away without our permission, which is public property, to them to put all these pilings and everything. I'm almost afraid that the trenching would be as damaging to the bottom as putting up the pylons, these towers. The old towers, no. And I'm really way not in favor of doing anything like this jet trenching. I just see that as a disaster for our natural resources out there. Thank you very much, and once again, I thank you all. Jason, I've been, every time I get an email or Facebook or something from the situation I'm real happy. I wish you'd move over to Northumberland and fight for us over there too.
Hi, folks. I'm Dave Coakley, and I'm actually a temporary transplant, I guess. My wife and I had a home built on the river. The slide that showed the sunset going down behind the bridge is the view from our backyard, or front yard, as you say here. And I'm not a sailor. My friends who are sailors refer to me as human ballast. But I sort of got involved with this issue. I'm all in favor of power. I mean, gosh, you know, we like to turn on the switch and have the light go on and all that sort of thing. And my question is going to be to whoever's appropriate. You know, Ian, I would think would be appropriate. Talking about the York River, having done the horizontal drilling under the York River, I'm trying to get an idea of what the length of that underwater drilling was, what the cost of that was.
Yeah.
But before you answer that, I have to say that coming from my hometown in Maryland, I'm almost afraid to say it's the murder capital of the world, Baltimore, but I am one of 4 families who have come to the Northern Neck, and we love it here. We love everything about it. We love the pace. I think we're all scrambling to get the heck out of Maryland, but it's really unique down here, and it's everyone's friendly. The group that is putting this together, led by the guys up on the stage, is extraordinary, and to the point where it's an 8-hour round trip for me to come to these meetings, and I've only missed 2, and that's because my wife was going to kill me if I came back down again. But I give you guys all the credit in the world. Anything that any of us can do financially to back up the efforts that are being made is money very, very well spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, you want to?
Sure. The crossing of the York River is a really interesting one. It was something that Dominion were forced to do because the Navy basically wouldn't let them build a tower crossing across the York. You can see on the slide, you can see a slide up there on the screen that actually shows the crossing itself. On the left-hand side, as you look at it, you can just see the York Bridge. So when you look out as you're going over the York, you need to look quite a long distance across to see the Dominion Power Station on your left-hand side, on the far side of the river. Now, the total York crossing was somewhere in the region of 16,500 feet. But it was a complex crossing. You can see those black dots on the screen. Those are temporary structures that the contractor Mears needed to build into the river. They built huge, great platforms by driving steel into the riverbed, and then they put all their equipment on those. And they treated it as 3 separate bores, actually 6 bores, but three separate lots of HDD activity. From the north to the first platform was some 5,800 feet, then a long section of 7,300 feet, and then just under 3,000 feet from that south platform to the shore. And they had to do quite a lot of really technical, challenging things that hadn't been done before. Because the bores, excuse me for using my arms, but I'm going to try and draw a demonstration. The bores both came up like this, the platform in the middle. So you had conduits, steel conduits coming up like that they had to thread the pipes through. So they actually welded sleeves on them, some 5,500 feet, I think, at 1 and 200 feet. I don't remember the exact numbers. But once they'd done those at each platform, they were able to pull the cables through, and then they dug trenches next to the platforms and lowered these into it. So it was an extremely complex project. It cost Dominion something like $81 million for these 3 sets of drillings, that it also included bends in them. HDD is generally done as a straight line. This one had a 32 degree and a 45 degree bend in it, which are pretty complex things to do. So in total, Mears charged Dominion $81 million for this project. A very, very complex project indeed. In contrast, one assumes that the Rappahannock River would be one straightforward shot under the river, one straight line, with none of these platforms needed in the river. Mears say they can do over 10,000 feet. It's about 9,002 or 9,004 that would be needed on the Rappahannock, something like that. So potentially, it should cost much, much less than Dominion paid for this project. So it's one we would love to have explored. We would love to have people thoroughly investigate the costs and see what it would really cost. We would love to have the opportunity for that conversation.
Just basically follow up on that. The Dominion crossing was 3.5 miles. It cost $81 million. The Rappahannock would only be about 2.1 miles. That's about 30% less. It's a far less complex type of horizontal drilling, so the cost should be considerably less than that $81 million. We know that the tower proposal is already $30 million.
This gentleman's been, I promised him. Thanks, Phil. Spike, you're next.
Hi. My concern is safety on the river. Following up on Bruce's comments, I sail. That main span is 360 feet wide. It is a bottleneck in the Rappahannock River. There's no getting around it. At the end of August, I was sailing back home, and the push boat ran me with a barge that was coming down the river. I contacted them because the AIS indicated that we were going to meet under the main span. And I didn't want to be there at that time. I contacted the skipper, and we agreed that I would stay on the bay side. I tacked back and forth a couple of times. I believe that if those towers were there, because of the wind eddies that are set up, because of the reduction in the line of sight, because of the towers, I think they are building a hazard to navigation, and I believe that the Rappahannock River has had problems in the past, and I'm surprised that the Coast Guard has not gotten involved in this to advocate for the safety of those who use the river. River traffic carries priority over bridge traffic, and has anybody contacted the Coast Guard? That's my question.
The Coast Guard was contacted by the VMRC and invited to provide an input. They chose not to.
I see. Thank you.
Spike, you were.
Thank you. Very briefly, Spike Dunn from Kilmarnock. We've addressed cost, but we haven't really addressed what the cost effectiveness would be. And as everybody knows, figures can lie and liars can figure. So we're going to get any number that whatever party wants to push in favor of their view, as opposed to another party would give us different numbers to propose their view. I'm not going to give examples of that, but I would like to say I think it's time for the Rappahannock River and the authority. Oh, by the way, an aside, a question over here was how much is Dominion paying to hook onto the bridge? I've heard that it's 100,000 a year. I don't know that for a fact. But going back to what I was going to say, I think it's time for the aesthetics to be approached, since the figures are something that we can't really pin down until the final bill is submitted. But the aesthetics are going to be with us forever. Right now, my opinion, the towers are not the most pleasant, beautiful entry to Lancaster County or Middlesex County, depending on which way you're going. We can get them out of sight and out of mind. That would be a lot better. The only question I would have is it more expensive to repair strung lines on the tower, or is it less expensive, more expensive to repair strung lines on the tower if they should break, or to repair under the water cables if they should break? And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know you do, but if you like a question, that's my question.
It's a, you know, it's a valid question, but what's going to break an underwater cable? There we go, power, you know, so there are some things that could break it.
If you recall the first publication we had about the proposal here, as I remember it, one of the reasons that these cables had to be replaced was that they're worn out. Now, how do you wear out a power cable that transmits electrons? I don't know. Maybe those electrons are wearing a path back and forth from one power station to the next. I don't see how you can wear the cables out.
I think it's mainly the connections, the old brackets and the existing towers. The insulators were just recently replaced.
Question? I promised this lady over here who's been so patient. No.
I just wanted to try to clear up something. Bruce brought up the safety factor. Oh. Bruce brought up the safety matter. This gentleman down here brought up the safety matter. And you said you didn't think that had been addressed. It was addressed. I was at the Democratic meeting, Mr. Smith, when Dominion was sitting right there, and I addressed that. I'm coming here, I've been here, and I left here, and I came back here. And I love this place, and I sailed that place have sailed all my life. Dominion told me that, yes, madam, it has been addressed, your safety factor has been addressed, and we have put these bumpers up that will not damage your boat. They didn't tell me that it would save my life. So they are aware of that. They told me they were aware of the safety factor, but what they're doing about it, I don't know. But I just wanted to tell you that that had been addressed and Dominion knew it.
Thank you. Question way over here.
Carl and I want to have a addressing you. This was not my original comment. Bruce talked about the daytime. If you tack on the river, if it's foggy, you've got a totally different situation in the evening or at night. If you can imagine going outside at night, come up the river, be confronted perhaps with a barge like this jet had, or you've got that issue that my original comment was, do you have, if somebody asks you what your preference was, do you have that preference? And I presume, again, it's probably the director, the HDD. I would also suggest in the million kilowatt hours that Dominion produces every year, that number is going to be something that I think that will be what Dominion looks at. For the CFOs to look at what does that cost do to me, and what is for what they're proposing now. What is that number per kilowatt hour? Well, there's not enough zeros. 0.0 to 10 to the minus 6. I don't know what the number is, but I would think you would want a preferred amount and what that impact might be on whatever option you would choose. Thank you.
I think these are just some of the alternatives we proposed tonight. I think we've mostly looked at HDD as the ideal because we had the comparison of the York River. I think the premise of getting the State Corporation Commission involved is the purpose to vet these alternatives, to look at the costs, to determine what the impact to rates would be. But in terms of impacts to rates, the transmission costs are spread across the entire rate base. If you read your electric power bill, there's a little line on there that talks about transmission as part of the cost. So if we spread the incremental amortized cost of any of these projects over the entire base, over the lifespan of these, you're talking mere pennies to customers. It would be essentially the cost of one postage stamp.
Your slide is up.
This basically shows you what the different cost is. The first one represents $30 million, a stamp and a half per year at $60 million, and it goes up in that incremental rate. That's just, if you were just looking at the flat numbers. Dominion calculates this, of course, in a complicated formula, so this would be just the direct impact if these numbers were spread directly to you, but it would probably be far less, even less amount to this in your bill. You would not, one particular project, you would not see an impact in your bill. It's not like you would see 25% or a 10% increase in your bill if we went HDD versus towers. These types of things these types of improvements are in the terms of billions of dollars a year and are spread across the entire grid network and the customer base.
Did you say per year?
Per year.
Per year, yes.
Right?
Stamp per year.
Yes.
One postage stamp per ratepayer per year would be the cost of the net increase of doing HDD versus towers.
And that's if the delta was 3 to 5 times.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to see because of the lights. I apologize if I've ignored this group over here. So I just have a hard time seeing it. Yes, ma'am. 2 more questions.
I'm wondering, because we're all in agreement here, I believe, we've come because of the towers. We have all reasons why not. I mean, the safety of navigation, oysters, the view, roads. Now, that better?
That's better.
Sorry. So, given that I do not see any reason why Dominion has standing on this, what is the problem? I don't understand politics enough. Evidently, that seems to be the biggest issue. What is in it for them to go against the customer?
It's a great question. For those who couldn't hear it, what is in it? Why is Dominion doing this against the clear opposition of so many people? And the answer is that the way Dominion works as a regulated monopoly, they are almost compelled to always choose the low-cost option. Virginia has intentionally and successfully kept electric rates low because they've insisted on the low-cost option time and time again. That's the bottom line. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't circumstances that call for exceptions, and we hope that this is one. This, you know, every project that Dominion proposes is opposed by someone. I guarantee it must be very frustrating for them because they know wherever they're going to build a power line, there's going to be somebody that doesn't want to see it. And they're going to raise that, and they're going to call their congressmen and their board of supervisors. They're going to demand that those wires be buried. It happens everywhere. So the question is this just another instance of a power line being strung across a hillside that offends some homeowner? And we would clearly argue very aggressively, absolutely not. This is an absolute exception. This is an iconic bridge crossing one of the most unindustrialized, pristine rivers in the Commonwealth. This situation is unique, and therefore special consideration is justified. But again, Dominion will always default to the low-cost option until, as Ian mentioned, I think, until they're instructed to do something else. If the SCC, through this hearing process, were to decide in our favor and come out and say, Dominion, you can't build the towers. You've got to do one of the other options. They'd find the next least expensive option, I believe. And they would do it. They'd do it gladly.
But they're not even doing it straight up. I mean,
No, they won't, because if they were to take a head count and say, well, gosh, we've got all these people here, we got all those letters in the paper opposing it, we're going to have to do something else. Well, if they do that for us, what about the next site, and the next one, and the next one, and before long, everybody's got to have it buried underground, and then the cost of electricity goes up.
oh, the slide that you had about the view, what they would look like, and it was awake, and that was it. They're doing it underhanded. I mean, if they really felt they had a position, and they just hammered away at cost,
Right.
they would have some standing. They would say, we already know about navigation. We've done this for navigation. Here's why it's fine. Here's why it's good for the ocean. Why aren't we hearing?
I will try to answer that a little bit. I think a little bit because they want to avoid what's here tonight. They try to get their projects done on time and in budget. And when they have a lot of opposition, if they can avoid opposition, I think they take every opportunity to do that.
We need to take public utility out of the issue.
I think this is one of the reasons why in America we look against monopolies, because you run into this type of problem when you have a monopoly. They have ultimate power.
Gentlemen in the back.
Hold on. Let's take about one more question because it's getting late now. We don't want to be here all night. So one more question and we'll wrap up for the evening.
I have a very quick question. So it's a little more on left field, but I've noticed a lot of signs in town, you know, the no tower, shame on Dominion. Also, I've seen on social media who is spearheading that? Is that something that you guys are helping to fund, or is that from like private people and contributions?
We are No Towers. That was the name that was first chosen when this effort started, and then we added Save the Rappahannock Coalition, so it's one and the same. No Towers and Save the Rappahannock Coalition.
Are you guys buying the signs?
Yes, oh yeah. That's where a lot of the contributions that people in this audience have made have gone to pay for the signs and others.
This was a total grassroots campaign. We started from behind the 8 ball with very little notice of it, and we've had to organize and fund this campaign by raising funds and getting out the message, and not only to the constituents, but to the local governments as well.
Thank you.
One more question. Let's take this lady over back here.
That's not a lady, that's the red card.
Back here in the blue. We'll take
That's not a lady.
This is just 2 observations. First of all, there was concern about outages. When they do conduit underneath, when they do the horizontal drilling, they put extra lines in that. So if a line did get corrupted, you can switch over to another line that's unused. That's one observation. The other is Dominion, as we know, is a publicly traded company, and perhaps some of you own their stock, and you've been happy that you do. But because they're publicly traded, they do have to publish what compensation that they give to their executives. And Tom Farrell, the CEO last year, the published compensation was over $22 million. Now that's for 1 year. We may be talking about a $30 million increase to put it underneath, but that is for 60 years. So a company that can pay $22 million in 1 year for the chief executive, I think, should take consideration to do what's right in this case.
Yeah. Oh, yes, ma'am.
You guys have mentioned several things. If BMRC doesn't really have control of it under the water, only under the water, they have nothing to do with it above the water, why did anybody ever think that that would be sufficient permission, is one question. Who owns the river? Certainly Dominion doesn't own the river. If they're trying for so much more power, and some of you have alluded to this, what is it that's so big? That, is anybody expecting some huge secret thing that we don't know about that's coming here? Oh, I see. Has anybody considered, I haven't followed it closely enough, have you guys put this on television with Richmond, with Tidewater, with Northern Virginia? Has any of that been covered there? Just call the reporters. Say, look, there's a big brouhaha happening, and see if they'll be interested in looking into it. We had a big controversy like this in Northern Virginia where they wanted to bring the power lines from the Shenandoah Valley through Winchester and other parts of rural Northern Virginia, and Dominion just basically rolled over everybody. You mentioned these bumpers that they're going to put in. What do those bumpers do to the current? What do they do to the flow of the river? What do they do to the bed of the river? You know what happens when you put in a jetty to try to calm the waters that are pounding the beaches and the surf. I mean, there's a lot more questions that need to be asked, I think.
You're very much right. The VMRC only looked at the purview of the bottom. The Army Corps of Engineers, had they done a full review of this project, would have looked at some of those things like view shed and things above the water line. But because they used a nationwide number 12 permit, we basically rubber stamped the permit for this type of project and eliminated that sort of review. It was just a high level, check the boxes, move forward kind of review in regards to that. And that's the hope of what, if we get the SCC, when we win the SCC permanent injunction tomorrow, they will then look at these alternatives and possibly other ones that we don't even know about yet. And vet those and look at the numbers, and they will do that process, and that's what we need to have happen tomorrow, so we can continue to move forward on getting the best solution.
And I think we're going to wrap up here, but I want to make sure that you all are aware that if we win tomorrow, and we do expect to win, and then we begin this process of a full review at the SCC. There will be opportunities for public input at the SCC. So all of you are welcome to come to the SCC. In fact, you're welcome to come tomorrow morning and see the proceedings. It'll start at 10 o'clock in Richmond. But if you don't want to come tomorrow, there will be subsequent opportunities for you to come in and make your opinions known. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you all very much.